Hi all, so thanks for joining us this afternoon. This is the first of 3 sessions that are focused on Shibden Hall this afternoon, and this one is a Q&A with the 2 other volunteers from Shibden Hall, Colette and Ian. So I've got lots of questions prepared, but also if you want to put questions in the chat, what I'll do is pick them up as they sort of fit into the conversation, but we'll also leave about 15 minutes at the end for any questions that we've missed. So just put them in the chat. If you can put a queue in front of them, it'll just make it easier for me to spot. But I think what we'll start with is, I'd like to know what your history is with Shibden Hall. So when was the first time you visited, and what made you want to be a volunteer, and how long have you been volunteering? So if we start with Ian.
Hi there. Yeah, well, I guess when you're born in Halifax, and Shibden Hall is it's almost like in your DNA. It's the building in Halifax that probably every school child knows. You're just brought up with Shibden Hall. You go as a school child on a school trip. Your parents take you on trips. I've got photographs of myself as a young child in one of the pedalows in the boating lake. So I've just always known Shibden Hall. It's just one of those things that's always been there. So it's always been in the back of my mind. And I moved away for many years. I moved down south for many years, but every time I came home to visit my parents, one of the things I would do is, because I've got this fascination with old buildings, one of the things I would always do would be to visit Shibden Hall. So it's been sort of there throughout my life. Well, one of the times I moved back north about 5 years ago, and on one of my sort of trips to Shibden Hall, this was back in the day before Gentleman Jack, so it was actually a very quiet period. And I went in there, and I was sort of the only visitor. I was the only visitor in the whole house. And there was a guy on, an old guy called Norman. And Norman gave me this tour of Shibden Hall. And because I was the only person there, I got the full works. I got everything. We went in the tower. He showed me, he didn't take me down to the cellars, but he showed me the cellars. He took me through room by room, and it was the full works. And I was so sort of impressed and taken by his tour. I just thought to myself, I'd like to do that one day. I want to do what Norman's doing, because it was just such fun. I mean, even when I got home, I sent an email to the council, and I said, I've just had the most fantastic tour from Norman. I said, he's brilliant. So from that moment on, I just thought, yeah, one day I'm going to do this. And lo and behold, that's where I find myself today as a volunteer.
Brilliant. And Colette, how about you?
Well, a little bit different, Ian. I'm not a local or of Yorkshire. You can tell by my accent, but although I had heard about Lister years previously before Gentleman Jack, through that movie, the Maxine Peake movie, Secret Diaries of Anne Lister. It was only when Gentleman Jack aired I realised that you could visit Shibden Hall. And straight away I came up to visit, and because I stayed the night in Hebden Bridge, I instantly fell in love with Hebden Bridge, but loved my visit to Shibden Hall. And I ended up moving to Hebden Bridge early 2020, and of course it was only natural I was going to apply to volunteer at Shibden Hall, because I love old historical buildings as well myself, and the association with Anne Lister, and I had started doing some transcription work on the volunteer project the last quarter of 2019. So between transcribing the diaries and just loving everything about Anne Lister and being fascinated, and also having visited Shibden Hall, I just loved it. The volunteers that I met that day, or any of my visits in 2019, I just found it just so friendly, and I thought this is going to be perfect for me. Once I moved up, it was the first thing I did was to apply to volunteer. Had to wait a little bit because of lockdown and then opening again, but it's just been the best experience, and to be involved with Shibden Hall, yeah, really a dream job, you could say, even though it's volunteering.
Do you want to tell me a little bit about what your role involves? Because I think you're both room stewards, aren't you?
Yeah.
So what does
We
a room
are,
steward
yeah.
do?
Do you want to go ahead?
Well, basically, yeah. I mean, basically, you're there on hand in the room, and often you've got the whole. You can have the whole house to yourself because sort of the guys that work there are often down what you call their end, like the end where the offices are and the reception and the shop, and they're down there. And we're really lucky actually as the volunteers because we get the whole older part of the the main body of Shibden Hall. We get it to ourselves. So we're kind of there just to be on hand. You weigh up each visitor at a time. Some want help and you can visibly see they're seeking help. Some people just want to come in and wander at their own pace, and they don't want bothering, and you can recognize that. So you kind of look for the eye contact, and if you get the eye contact, you can open the conversation, or you hear them discussing something, and they're having a discussion between themselves, and sometimes you can interject and help offer some information. So really, we're just there to enhance the visitor experience. Really, we're there to offer what knowledge we have gained. We're offered to give, just to help them enjoy their visit. And if we can show them things or tell them things that they didn't previously know, then you just feel that you're adding to the enjoyment of their visit. So really, we're there to, I guess we're also there to just to keep an eye on things as well, just to, because you do get a lot of kids running around and people touching things. So you're not heavy-handed, but you can just gently remind people that they shouldn't be touching, or the kids shouldn't be going under the barrier. But really, we're there to be able to just offer our opinion and our knowledge on anything that they want to know, really.
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell, Ian. It's so much fun just meeting people as well from everywhere and all walks of life, not just LGBT, but all ages, families, all nationalities. It's really nice. Yeah.
Do you tend to? Oh, sorry, Ian. Go ahead.
The thing. No, I was just going to say, you when you're there, it's a fantastic opportunity to add to your own knowledge, because you're learning on the job, so to speak. We're getting so many people in now, so many visitors that actually are so more educated on Shibden Hall and the people that have lived there. So just by talking to them, you're also expanding your own knowledge, because they are also teaching you things now that you might not have known, because everybody's got like their sort of specialist subject, but we're getting people from all walks of life. We're getting the historians, we're getting the Gentleman Jack fans, we're getting the Anne Lister fans, and every one of them that you talk to adds to your own personal knowledge now that you can pass on to other visitors.
Has volunteering at Shibden Hall sort of made you a bit more of a detective as well? I know that both of you, I think, have sort of gone and done more research about Shibden and Anne Lister and various families and stuff. Do you want to tell us a bit about that? Maybe Colette?
Yeah, well, with the diaries, of course, I'm always dipping into them to see, oh, well, what happened at this time and how, some of the renovation stuff. And because I haven't been there as long as Ian, but I'm always trying to just see what Anne had written in the diaries. Yeah, and I'm very interested in any of the new information through the other research groups, and I'm very interested and fascinated about the portraits, and are there any other portraits of Anne Lister, and is that what she really looked like? Because that main painting is based on previous sketches that she had set for, and not sure which is the most accurate. And yeah, and wondering why there's no portrait of Anne Walker there, and is there anything in existence, and is there anything like, would there be anything with both of them, any portrait? And so yeah, I'd love to go through a cellar full of old storage of portraits and just see if if anything turned up. It'd be like the jackpot. Yeah. So for me, that's my little interest. Don't know. Ian has been maybe researching more about the house. Is that right? Or...
Yeah, I mean, for me, my draw to Shibden Hall is more the building. Really, that's why I started at Shibden Hall. I mean, you develop other interests as you go along, but my initial draw was the building. So I'm always looking for places where there used to be a doorway, or there used to be a window, or beams were here and ceilings have gone and things like that. And there's a great guy there called Steve, and he's full of knowledge, and I'm often bombarding him with questions about what was here and what was there and why is this changed and why is that changed. So it's just fascinating, and every time you go you find something that you didn't see before. I mean, yesterday, for example, we were looking at a doorway, and it dawned on us that it had, well, Steve already knew, but it had been a window, and I didn't realize that this now doorway had been a window. But when you look at it, you could see where the stone mullion had been taken out, and the window had been changed into a doorway. So it's things like that. Every time you go, you find something new that you didn't know, and it's just, and the more you discover, the more you want to discover, and it's just absolutely fascinating. I mean, it really does get under your skin, and as I say, in 600 years so much has occurred. There's just so much to learn, and it's just absolutely fascinating to learn more and more about the history of the house.
Do you each have a favorite room?
I would say
Colette?
the house body, the main hall, the main room as you go in, which is called the house body. Because I suppose I spent a lot of time in there. That's where, not so much upstairs, but I just love it as well. The fact that Lister did practically all that renovation in there as it looks now, and the architecture or the design that she put into that at that time, and it's still there. So, and it's the main room where people would then come in, and you meet, where I would first meet any visitors coming in. So yeah, for me that's my favorite. Yeah.
What about you, Ian? Do you have a favorite room or particular object or place?
I think I've got two favorite rooms, really. I think if I found myself locked in Shibden for the night and you having to spend the evening there, I'd probably want to spend the evening in the study, because it's nice, it's cozy, there's loads of books, it's just a nice sized room, there's some nice furniture in it, and so I think I'd want to spend my evening locked in the study. But I suppose one of my other favorite rooms would probably be the dining room, because you can see so much history in the dining room. You can see where it's been extended over the years. You can see where the floor's been lowered. We are able to open some of the paneling in the dining room. It's not on public view unless we open the paneling. But when you open the paneling, you can see behind it the original wall of Shibden Hall from about, well, the 1400s. You've got the original stud-work there from the 1400s. Also painted on this stud-work, you've got some wall paintings that date from about 1583, and they're very sort of faded these days, but they've still got the monogram of Robert Waterhouse, who had these paintings done in the 1580s. So that's absolutely fascinating, that you can see all this history from sort of the 1400s through the 1500s, right up to the 1850s, when Dr. John Lister extended the room. So you've just got so much history in one room that's kind of on show. So it's also the entrance to the tower, so you can see some of Anne Lister's work in there as well. So it's just an absolutely, I find that quite a fascinating room.
I think the fact that you've got so much history at Shibden Hall is what sort of blows my mind. That there's, like, if you think about things that have happened, we've had, like, English Civil War and gunpowder plots and War of the Roses, that all happened whilst it existed. I'm wondering, I think I know what Colette's answer will be, but if you could sort of travel back in time to sort of be a guide at a particular point in history, I wonder where you'd go back to. Should we hear from Ian and then we can hear from Colette? You never know, it might not be the answer that I expect.
I think I would go back to the 1580s, the 1590s, It's the time when the Waterhouse family were in residence. Robert Waterhouse was probably the most powerful of all the Waterhouses, and he's the one that probably did the most changes to the house of the whole Waterhouse family. So I'd like to go back to that period and just be able to chat to him and see what life was like at Shibden in the 1590s. And we have so many questions about how the house would have looked at that point that we kind of have answers to, but we don't have an absolute definite answer to. So I'd like to go and meet Robert Waterhouse and just quiz him on what he did to the house, when he did it, how it looked before he'd done it, how it looked after he'd done it, you know. So I'd just like to get a better picture of the house from the late 1500s.
What about you, Colette?
Well, of course, it's the obvious answer. While Anne Lister was there, and Anne. And but part of me also would be interested in meeting John Lister and, you know, chatting with him about the diaries and what he thought of them. I think it would be interesting to really just have a conversation about why he did what he did with them, and, you know, that would be quite interesting. But of course, if I had the choice, it would be to sit and have a cup of coffee with Anne and Dan, because they're always drinking coffee. Well, I've seen a lot in the diaries of coffee drinking going on. So, yeah,
Definitely.
and I love coffee.
I wonder if you've each got like a favourite question that visitors ask you, and when they ask it, you're like, brilliant, I could just talk to them about this for ages now. Colette, have you got something that you're like, yes, this is my like passion that I want to talk to visitors about?
Well, I think the diaries, when people start asking me about the diaries, yeah, and then I can just go in any direction with those and talk about travel journals. Actually, there was one day a young woman and her mother came in, and the young lady was talking about, well, she mentioned something about National Geographic, that she worked for them. She did some writing, and then they didn't know about Anne Lister's travel journals, and I was telling them about her travel journals, and she was really fascinated, and she thought, oh, you know, sometimes they have a historical, they do articles in National Geographic on old travel journals by famous people, say Agatha Christie. They did some at one point, and she was quite interested in Anne Lister's travel journals and was thinking maybe it could be possible one day to do an article in National Geographic featuring some of her journals or extracts. And I thought, I just got so excited about that. So just talking about the diaries with people is probably one of my favorite things. And I do love the house and getting to know more about the house, of course, and talk about the portraits of Anne and the different portraits and in the house body. But yeah, I'm diary focused when it's a question on that. It's my, I can go on for a long time about it.
What about yourself, Ian?
I guess several things really. I mean, I do like talking about the portraits. I love talking about the portraits. I love talking about the artists, the sitters, when they were done. I like talking about those stained glass windows. That's quite a favourite subject. I like people to ask questions about what each one means and where they've come from and how long they've been there. So I guess just, I do like talking about the contents really. I do, you know, I get quite enthused when people want to know more. You know, we do get a lot of questions about Gentleman Jack. I mean, you know, we go into, you know, that's why a lot of the visitors come. But then when somebody comes in and starts asking other questions, you know, about other things in the house, it's like the furniture, you know, how long it's been there, whether it's original, you know, and questions like that. And I say the portraits in particular and the stained glass. I love talking about the stained glass because it's such historic, important glass in those windows. And when people notice it, I just get carried away with talking about it. And you know, that's the sort of questions I really, really enjoy.
Brilliant. Someone's offered if you offer personal guided tours.
Well,
I
I
suppose if
wouldn't
it's
say
quiet, if we couldn't be in if it's like really quiet and there are nobody else in.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say that we don't offer personal guided tours, but if somebody comes and, you know, if we're in a quiet period and there's not many booked in, I on many occasions have walked, and I'm sure Colette has as well, we've gone from room to room discussing the history of each room with people. So it just depends on the day, really, because, you know, if you've got a lot of people in the house, you can't really afford to just go round with one or two people, because you've got to think about everybody everybody wants information and everybody wants to know. So you can't just dedicate all your time to one or two people. But having said that, if the house is absolutely quiet, which on a number of occasions it can be, then I am more than happy to go from room to room with the visitors and you know, just pass on knowledge and answer questions.
I wonder, in terms of like knowledge and passing on information, how, because there's so much research, particularly about Anne Lister and Anne Walker going on at the moment, I'm wondering how you like update your tours and how do you share that information sort of between the volunteers, and how do you decide what piece of research, new research to use, and what you're like, oh, maybe that's not 100%, it's not been proven, kind of how do you make those decisions and talk about it? Should we start with Colette this time?
Well, I would explain it as well as some research has found out this. So I would convey it like that. And if there was evidence to back things up, I would, give that information. But, you can explain previously it was thought that this happened or that, or this was the situation, and but new research and evidence has found this. So, and there are some new bits of information coming, especially about Anne Walker. As far as I know, yeah, there's a lot of new stuff being discovered. So yeah, I would just go with that way of explanation for anything new. Yeah, Ian, I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with Colette. When I first started at Shibden, the story was regarding Anne Walker, that she was forcibly removed from the Red Room, that a constable turned up with the solicitor and basically broke the door down. And when they went into the room, they found her there with blood-stained handkerchiefs and loaded pistols on the table, and that was sort of the accepted story that had been passed down almost from volunteer to volunteer. But of course, that's all changed now, so we don't go down that route anymore now, so where information changes, we change out the way that we pass knowledge on. And really, unless I'm absolutely certain of something now, I would try and avoid a subject unless I'm absolutely certain of it. But generally, there's always somebody in the house that if you don't know the answer to that question, you can find somebody in the house that can help you answer those questions. I mean, I'm not going to pretend to be an Anne Lister scholar by any means, So if I had a question on Anne Lister, I'd maybe ask somebody like Colette, who's studied her more than I have. But at the same time, Colette might come and ask me a question about the windows or something. So we share information between ourselves and both add to our knowledge that way.
Exactly. Yeah.
It blows my mind how much information the volunteers take in and are able to share. Like, I went on a tour a few years ago and it was like, I was amazed by how much knowledge you all had. There's a couple of questions about sort of specifics in the house. So one of them is asking if any of Anne's dishes or kitchen items from the period still exist in the house that we know of.
I'll let Ian answer that, but I think not, or am I right?
I think not. In fact, I do believe that when Anne died, a lot of the contents of her personal possessions were cleared out. But I also know that in the 1930s, when they opened the house as a museum, I think the council did request from the general public many items of sort of kitchenalia and such items in order to refurnish the kitchen. So I think a lot of the items in the kitchen are actually donations that have been given from the people of Halifax over the years. And some of them were probably brought from Bankfield Museum. But I think there's very, very few of Anne Lister's bits left. And to be honest, with something as simple as a kitchen pot or a pan, we probably wouldn't, we might be able to date it to a period, but we wouldn't know exactly what date a pan was, you know, as to whether it was Anne Lister's or somebody that came after, you know, or Dr. John's, or, you know, because I guess some things change so little over the years, although you can roughly date them. So unlike a book which might be inscribed or something, you can't date certain items to certain people. But I do know the council did request from the people of Halifax many, many kitchen items to help furnish the hall back in the early days.
Fascinating, that. I'm wondering, with this sort of popularity of Gentleman Jack, do people, because obviously some of the filming's in the hall, but I think it isn't, the hall doesn't necessarily look exactly the same as it does in Gentleman Jack. And also there's, because Anne Lister made all these sort of building changes and improvements and stuff, it looks different from her time. So I wonder, how do you explain that to people who come in who've only seen the show and haven't necessarily read any of the diaries, without sort of like ruining their day of like romantic notions by being like, oh well, it's all wrong, because you kind of gone for a nice day out, haven't they? How do you negotiate that? And what are the major changes that are different from in the show? Should we start with Colette?
Well, I think one of the main things is her bedroom, you know, her actual bedroom in the house. It's so small, they couldn't film in there, so they had to build that in the studio, and so it looks quite different on the show. So yeah, you can explain it that way, that, you know, they just, it wasn't possible to shoot in that room. So, you know, a lot of people don't realize that, and they expect her bedroom to look like it is on the series. But yeah, you just explain certain props were brought into certain rooms, and, you know, some of it was used, and some of the furniture is what's in the background in the show. But yeah, this is, I suppose, filming. They have to be creative in whatever way that works, and changing the style and the design of the room a little bit to suit what they want for that scene. So
okay, Henry, no licking.
What about you, Ian? How do you sort of, what are the major changes, and how do you sort of explain them to people?
Well, you just have to be honest, really. You know, I mean, you're there to give them a history of the house as well, and you have to be honest, you know. And I mean, basically, the first series was set between 1832 and 1834, and, you know, the house, it just didn't look like it does today in 1832. You know, I mean, that staircase was never there, the fireplace was never there. The only, you know, if her aunt and uncle, if her father Jeremy and her aunt Anne were to stand in the house body today, they wouldn't really have a clue where they were, because while they were alive, they never really saw the house as we see it today. You know, her aunt, for example, would have never walked up and down that staircase, even though you saw them doing it in the program. But you just have to explain this, because at the end of the day, it is Anne's house, and the story is about Anne, really, you know, and it is her house. So to have filmed it somewhere else in a studio set, it just wouldn't have been the same, you know, as actually filming it in Anne's house. So I think it's very important it was filmed there, but you just have to explain to people that the look that it has in the television program did come at a later stage than it was, you know, perceived to be in the program. Because if you'd actually you would have had to build a complete different set to have had a house that looked like it did when Anne was initially living there. I mean, if anybody that's been, you'll know there's a great hall. Well, that great hall initially would have had a ceiling in it, you know, dividing it in half. So you wouldn't have had it open to the rafters in the early 1830s. So really, you just explain how it has evolved, and at the end of the day, the house as you see it today is Anne's work, but it just came at a later stage than the television program has portrayed it so far. But as I said, I think it's very important that it was filmed in Anne's house, because, you know, at the end of the day, it's still Shibden Hall, and that's where she lived. So I think you have to, you know, there is a bit of artistic license going on, but, you know, it's Anne's home, nevertheless.
Speaking of changes, someone's asked a question about, is there a story about when and why the East Tower was built? Do you know about, can you tell us about that?
Ian, do you want to handle that one?
The East as in the servants' quarters, do you mean? That's the East, isn't it? Am I on the right side? It depends. Yeah, East is the servant. It's not the library tower, is it?
No,
it's the other one.
The other end.
Is that right?
End, yeah.
Wait, what? Where the offices are?
Yeah, I don't know if Jenna, who asked the
Is that
question, wants to put something in the chat just to clarify. Is that the one that they mean? Yes, that one.
Yeah. Well, basically, it was just built as the servants' quarters. You know, originally it would have housed the butler's or the housekeeper's pantry. It housed the new kitchens. It housed all the staff bedrooms. It housed things like the buttery and it's just the service wing, really, as a service wing would be in any big house, and I guess that gave more living space in the main house, because once they took the kitchen where we have the old kitchen today, once they took that kitchen out of there and put it into the service wing, that old kitchen then got converted into a morning room, so it became another reception room in the house. So I suppose it enlarged the old house and pushed all the sort of the day-to-day running of the house down to the East End, as we call it. So that bottom East End was just the service wing for the staff, really, and created more living space in the main house.
I think my favourite bit of like Anne Lister's sort of improvements, even though you can't really see it, is the gardener's tunnel that leads out. So I was sort of quite interested that she wanted to keep the servants kind of separate, didn't she, and not really see them. I thought that was quite telling.
Yeah, and the corridor under the house for the servants, for the food service and whatnot. Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. She needed that. What do you think, Ian? Why that was?
Well, it is. I mean, it's a bit of a snobbery thing, isn't it? Really, you know, she didn't want to see the gardeners on the front lawn. She didn't want to see people bringing food from the kitchen to the dining room. So she sent them all underground. So I mean, like if you take the house body, for example, the main hall, you can actually get from the kitchens via a tunnel underneath the staircase, and you can come up in the buttery and pass food into the dining room, or you can come up in the tower and bring food to the dining room, so that no staff would ever have to be seen disturbing the family through the house body. And same with the gardeners as well. They could cross the garden underground instead of walking. You know, if she had visitors, rather than seeing gardeners walking across the front lawn, she sent them underground to get from A to B, so they didn't have to view them. I mean, I guess that's the same in many country house. It's not just peculiar to Shibden, is it? You know, I mean, none of the big families wanted to see the everyday working folk, really. They just hid them away. So Anne was just doing probably what all her friends were doing.
Sort of linked to that, there's a couple of questions about tenants and the tenant farms. I don't know if either of you know very much about sort of her tenants and if any of the farms still exist, or I'm assuming they're all in sort of private ownership now. If they do, I don't know how much you know about that side of it.
I don't know too much about that now and how it exists today. So Ian, you might learn that.
Again, I'm not really an expert on that. I mean, I do know there's no there's no farm still attached to the Shibden estate. You know, it is just the house and the parkland. And I think that the last John Lister, as his money worries grew and he became more in debt, I think he sold off. Well, he was selling land and buying land at the same time. You know, he would sell things, and then with the money he got, he would go and buy other parcels of land. But so I'm not a great expert on these things. I mean, one thing we do know from Gentleman Jack, that if you remember the pig man, Sowden, who was a tenant farmer of Anne's, we do know that he never actually got eaten by the pigs, as was shown on the television programme, and he did actually live till about 83. So that was a little bit of artistic license going on there in Gentleman Jack, but just to spice it up a little bit, I think. But he did live a good long life. But as I say, but other than that, I'm not really I don't know a great deal about the tenants or the farms.
Yeah, I think that's probably something where there's actually quite a big bit of research to be done, because I'd imagine that West Yorkshire Archives have a lot of details about, you know, sales of various properties at different times, and there's lots of work that could be done on a map. But yeah, so if anyone wants to take that piece of research on, I think that a lot of people will be quite interested in it. But yeah, it's one of those that's probably like an epic project, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and it's not something, to be honest, we tend to concentrate on a lot of things that we get asked a lot at Shibden, and there's so much to learn and so much to know. We kind of, that's not a question we get asked. Well, it's not a question I've been asked very often, so it's not something I've really gone into myself personally. I don't know about any of the other guys, but it's not something I've ever really concentrated on.
I mean,
So going, sorry, Colette.
Sorry, I haven't ever been asked that question at Shibden so far either. So yeah. But
so going back to specific things in the house, we've had a question about, do you get asked much about the Lister coat of arms, and what can you tell us about that?
you might know more about that, Ian, than me, with the length of time you've been discussing.
Well, I don't know a great deal about it. I mean, it appears in several places. You know, it appears on the big stone lion outside. It's got the 3 stars on it and the in-cut triangle, hasn't it? And it's on the big Lister lion outside. It's on the there's the Lister coat of arms on the fireplace upstairs in the red room. It appears on the carved wooden lion at the bottom of the stairs. It appears over the fireplace in the dining room. Dr. John had it carved over the fireplace in the dining room. And then it's on Anne's hatchment as well, her funeral hatchment, which is in the old corridor upstairs. But otherwise, I can't, I mean, for example, I couldn't tell you what the 3 stars represent. I'm not really an expert on heraldry, or, you know, I can't really give you a lot of information about that, I'm afraid. But it does appear throughout the house, and, you know, various members of the Lister family have had it inscribed in various places. Interestingly, though, I don't think it appears in the stained glass window in the house body. You've got the coat of arms of the other families. You've got the coat of arms of the Oates, who built the house. You've got the coat of arms of the Savills, who were the next family, and you've got the coat of arms of the Waterhouses, all in the stained glass windows. But I don't think you've got the Lister coat of arms in the window, but you have that carved in various other places. I say at least above 2 fireplaces, and in 2 lions, and the funeral hatchment in the sort of the library corridor upstairs. But as I said, other than that, I can't give you a lot of information about it.
Yeah, someone's put a link to a couple of articles in the chat about the coats of arms and stuff, so it's worth checking those out. Going back to volunteering, there's a really good question about how do you make sure that all the volunteers are sharing the same information, and do you have like sort of training sessions or meetings, or like virtual or in person, and what preparation do you sort of do to prepare to be a volunteer?
Well, I would if I wasn't sure about some information, I would always discuss with someone who might be, you know, there longer than me, or and who might know, I think might know more than me about it. So I wouldn't just presume on something that I picked up on and thought I would try to make, you know, verify it. So but I think we might discuss between each other if we have different ideas on things every now and again. I've done that anyway, a couple of times at least.
I think you mentioned you've got some sort of WhatsApp group as well in the training session. Was that Ian that spoke about that? That, you know, you have a little chat to other volunteers, but you might not have met them in real life. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, what you've got to remember is, although we're volunteers, many of us still have full-time jobs. Apart, you know, this is like a little hobby for us, and we have full-time jobs. So we only tend to do certain days of the week. And, you know, there are volunteers that I've never even met because I'm, say, never there on a Thursday, for example, you know, so I've never met the Thursday or the Friday or the Wednesday volunteers. So, you know, there are people I haven't met. But we do have a little WhatsApp group that we sort of run between us, and it involves the staff and the volunteers as well. And it's just somewhere we can post little snippets of information, or if you know there's you know, a talk on at the Minster or something, and maybe some people haven't heard about it, we just post a little link on this WhatsApp group. And sometimes we might, you know, if we've got a question that we can't answer ourselves, we can post it on this WhatsApp group. And, you know, so it's just for spreading little bits of information or asking questions between ourselves. And there's always, you know, if one of the volunteers doesn't know, there's always one or two members of staff at the house. As I mentioned, Steve already, he's you know, one of the full-time staff, and he's a mine of information. So you can, and he fortunately always seems to be there when I'm there. So if ever I get stuck, I always just go and have a little word with him, and usually end up bombarding him with questions. And you always get, one way or another, you always get the answer to the question that you're looking for.
Brilliant. Going back to Gentleman Jack just for a moment, someone's asked, well, a couple of people asked about what are the changes, probably this is for Ian, but Colette as well, the second part of the question, but what changes have you seen in visitors coming post Gentleman Jack? And are there any particular challenges that the increase in numbers have produced for you as a volunteer? Is it sort of more difficult if you've got larger groups and to relay the information, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, when I started, it was pre-Gentleman Jack. You know, it was although there was the television program was being filmed. You know, it was in progress. It hadn't hit the screens or anything. You know, so the word wasn't really quite out there. So the people that we were getting were purely the people that were either bringing their kids for a day out, or they were really interested in the house itself, you know, the architecture of the house, the furniture, just more interested in the house. Once Gentleman, you know, and we were getting maybe, I mean, on an average day, an average Saturday, for example, you might get between 10 and 20 visitors. I mean, it was really that quiet, you know, it was quiet, 10 and 20 visitors. Once Gentleman Jack hit the screens, that 10 or 20 went up to, I think at peak, we had just over 800 people in one day. So, you know, the numbers just leapt through the roof, you know, the volume of people that were coming. And the thing is, it's not for anybody that's been, it's not a huge house. It's not a massive house, you know, and it's a very old house. It's got very old floors, old stairs. And so instead of like 10 or 20 people going up and down the stairs, you had, say, 800 people going up the stairs, 800 people coming down the stairs. So, you know, the wear and tear on the house was going to be greater. So I think it's, you know, the maintenance issues have probably gone up a little bit. And also, of course, the questions have changed. You know, before it was like, you know, how much of the furniture is original? Now it's like, did Sir Anne Jones walk through this room? Or, you know, things like that. So, you know, and there's obviously much more. People are wanting to know much more about Anne Lister these days. So we've had to learn more. well, myself in particular, because obviously Colette knows a bit more about Anna Lister, but I didn't. So I've obviously had to learn more about the subject in order to answer questions.
And when I started volunteering, it was during lockdown, the beginning of lockdown, or shortly after that. And so entry was staggered, you know, they'd started to stagger it. So I was never going to be dealing with 800 people in one day. So I haven't had that experience. So it's been a bit easier for me in that regard. And yeah, having watched Gentleman Jack and known a lot about Anne Lister, yeah, I found it easy enough to answer Gentleman Jack questions. But there have been people who've come in and they're just interested in Gentleman Jack, Sir Anne Jones, and not one question about the house or anything else. So it is interesting. The what's the word? Well, very pure Gentleman Jack fans, let's say, compared to general visitors who don't know too much about Anne Lister or the series. Yeah.
We've just got 10 minutes remaining, so I'm just saying to people, if I've missed your question or you've got something pressing, just pop it in the chat now. But my last sort of question really is, we're coming up to Halloween. I think Halloween's the last date that you open, isn't it, before you sort of close for winter. So I'm wondering, have you heard any good ghost stories about Shibden Hall? Or have you felt a vibe, a ghostly, spooky vibe? Go on, Colette, I'm sure you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would pick up on things like that a little bit, or vibes, but I just think Shibden Hall is a great feeling in there. You know, just spending full days in there. It's just got a lovely feeling for such old house. But I have picked up like the scent of or the smell of a sweet tobacco, you know, outside Anne Lister's bedroom once, and it was strange because it was just lingering down around there. And I have heard of other people coming across a scent or a smell of a sweet tobacco or flowers in certain parts of the hall, but that's all I've experienced. But I'm not sure if Ian's had any other more dramatic experience than me, but it's interesting.
Well, I think when you get asked this question, you always, when you get asked this question, you always feel that you want to say yes, because I think the visitor wants you to say the place is haunted. They want you to tell them about ghost stories, and you know that's why they're asking, because they want there to be a ghost. You know, they want you to be, yes, it is, it's haunted. That's what they're asking for. You know, they don't want you to say no. They want you to say yes. I mean, I can honestly say in all my time there, and I've spent many a moment on my own in that house, you know, when, as I say, the staff are down their end and we've got the whole house to ourselves, and I've wandered around, and I can honestly say I've never ever experienced, as much as I want to say it's haunted, I've never, and I'm quite willing to, you know, I'd go around thinking, you know, if there's something here, come and, you know, show yourself. But I can honestly say I've never experienced anything. I mean, there was I was there one day, and this lady came in with her son, and I think they were professional ghost hunters or something. And the lady was walking around the house, and she had one of these. Do you call it a gygometer or something? I don't know. One of these things that, you know, I don't know what they're called. But anyway, she was walking around with this thing in her hand, and she just turned. You know, the house was quite busy, and she just turned to me. She said, "She's not happy, you know. She's not happy." And I said, "Who's not happy?" You know, I didn't know who she was talking about. I said, "Who's not happy?" She goes, Anne. She said, "She's not happy with all these people in her house." And I was like, "All right, okay, fair enough." I said, "Where is she then?" And she goes, "She's just over there watching." You know, and I was like, you know, but that's just, I don't know. I haven't experienced anything myself. That's all I can tell you.
Linked to that, I think maybe a nice way to start wrapping up would be, have you got a favourite or an important sort of myth that you'd like to bust? Is there a piece of information that's out there that you're like, you want to put the record straight on? No?
To think of a myth.
Well, I think that there's two really, and regarding Anne Lister, isn't there? I mean, for a start, she never wore a top hat, so I don't want to disappoint anybody. She didn't wear a top hat. That was a bit of artistic license for today's audience. You see, in Anne's day, she would have worn probably a black hat, a floppy black hat. And if she'd been seen walking around Halifax in this black hat, it's not a top hat, just a black floppy hat, people would have looked at her and thought, oh, that's a bit unusual, you know, that's a bit odd, you know, ladies don't wear hats like that. So she would have really stood out. If a lady walked around Halifax today in a black floppy hat, she wouldn't stand out, so people wouldn't think anything of it. So for today's viewer, you know, for today's television audience, I think Sally Wainwright put the black hat on Anne Lister so that we got this impression of how different she was. Because, you know, if we'd seen her in a black hat, we wouldn't, you know, if they'd put in a black hat today, we wouldn't think anything of it. But by putting her in a top hat, it for our eyes makes her like she would have been to people who were around in her day. She would have made, you know, she stands out. So that's why it was to exaggerate her character. And I think another thing to exaggerate her character, I don't know if you remember, but in series 1, Anne Lister shot a horse in the courtyard at the back of the house. You know, she took the gun and she shot the horse. Well, she never shot the horse. It was I think it was a groomsman or somebody called Pickles, and he shot the horse. But I think, again, to emphasize Anne's character, you know, the no-nonsense woman, brave woman, who would accept no nonsense from anyone, she just went up to it. And again, it was to emphasize her character that Sally Wainwright made Anne Lister shoot the horse. So I think that's two little bits of, I mean, they were done for good reason, just so that we got the impression of what she was like. But those two things were a bit of a myth, I'm afraid.
Do you have anything you wanted to add, Colette?
No, I was going to do the top hat, but it's all right. Ian's got it.
All right then. So finally, are you looking forward to April? Someone's when you were talking about, oh, I've not had 800 guests a day yet. Someone was like, oh, just wait till you March or April. Are you looking forward to it and excited for when? Yeah, we have this Anne Lister birthday week extravaganza.
I cannot wait for the Anne Lister birthday week, and yeah, I've already signed up for a number of events, and I can't wait to meet everybody coming to that. It's just going to be amazing. So yeah, that's definitely something to look forward to in 2022, as well as Gentleman Jack hitting the screens. It's hopefully around the same time. Let's see.
Brilliant. If someone wants to volunteer at Shibden Hall, how would they go about it? Can they just sign up on the council website to express an interest? Is that right? Or no?
Yeah, I think I just applied. Yeah. Go on,
There's
Ian,
there's a section. I was going to say there's a section on the website for volunteering. And you just apply through the Calderdale Council website. They're actively requiring, although we're closing for the next few months, but after lockdown, many of the volunteers, I think before lockdown, we had 18 volunteers. The last time I looked at the rota, it was down to about 8. So I think they are actively seeking volunteers now.
Brilliant. That might be a chance for someone that lives sort of locally to get involved. Thank you so much for joining us. Unless we've got 2 minutes left, unless you've got anything to add, we'll just sort of wrap it up. Yeah. So hopefully all the people on this session will be able to make it to Shibden Hall and sort of come and visit you and say hi. If you've got any, like, are either of you on social media where people can sort of keep in touch with you? If you've got a Twitter handle or anything, let us know and we can sort of share that. Otherwise, I guess keep an eye on the Shibden Hall website and the Shibden Hall sort of Twitter and Facebook feeds. and then we can to see what's going on, because you're closing after Halloween, and then we've got the Christmas craft fair, haven't we? And then it'll be spring before Shibden Hall opens. Is it normally March?
Yeah, we've I think we've got 2 more weekends before we close. Colette and I are the ones that seem to do the weekends between us. So there's either Colette there one weekend or me the other weekend. So if anybody comes, then please say hello. And please say you watched us on here, because we can see everybody who's watching here. So please say hello. We've got the craft weekend, which I think I said was the 13th, 14th of November. It's around that weekend, whatever the dates are it's around that one, the weekend around that one. And then we close right through till March, I think, and then we will be back.
Back with lots and lots of visitors by the sound of it. So thank you again for the session. We're going to end the session now. There's lots of comments though, just saying how great it is hearing your experiences volunteering at Shibden Hall. So the next session is with David Glover, and he's going to be talking about 600 years of Shibden Hall. So keep an eye on the next link for that.
Oh, it's been lovely. Thank you so much. And I see Annika there, Helena on screen. Hello. Hi. So yeah, thank you very much, and see you soon, Ian, at Shibden.
Yeah, thanks. See you soon. Bye.